Have you ever felt like someone is constantly watching you? Not just looking, but literally following every step you take? I'm not talking about surveillance cameras or a neighbor peeking through the window. I mean the feeling that someone knows your deepest secrets. They understand you better than you understand yourself. They know what keeps you up at night, what makes your heart race. At that time, I didn't understand it fully. I was an ordinary person, just like you. Work, home, occasional meetings with friends. Nothing out of the ordinary. But one day, something went wrong. And I became part of a game where you don't set the rules. And now, when everything is over, well, almost, I think it's time to tell you everything. Maybe it will save your life. 3 years ago, I was walking home late after work. It seemed like a normal night, as always. The cold wind seeped through my clothes, and I was trying to reach my apartment as quickly as possible. The dim light of the old street lamp in the courtyard barely flickered when I saw him. The man, he was standing by the wall, hidden in the shadow, staring right at me. At first, I thought he was just a random passerby, but something in his gaze made my skin crawl with cold sweat. This wasn't just casual interest. He didn't blink. His eyes were locked on me, and in that gaze, there was a certain threat. I quickened my pace, trying not to look at him, but the feeling that something had gone wrong followed me all the way home. Have you ever felt like you made the wrong move but couldn't figure out what exactly? That's how I felt. The man in the shadow was just standing there, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was the beginning of the end for me. But back then, I had no idea how right my instincts were. The next morning, everything seemed normal. Work, meetings, phone calls. But that feeling never left me. The feeling that something had started. And that evening, I got the letter. The letter that changed everything. You have been chosen. At first, I thought it was spam or some joke, but what came next made my heart race. You saw me. Now you're in the game. We are watching you. Do you know what was the scariest part of that letter? Not the words, but the fact that I instantly knew who had sent it. That man I had seen in the courtyard. I could feel it in my bones. He wasn't just a passerby. He was part of something bigger. And now, just days after that encounter, I was in the center of this game. What would you have done in my place? Would you have deleted the letter? Moved on with your life as if nothing had happened? Maybe you could have done that, but I couldn't. Something inside me made me reply. Who are you? I typed back, not even knowing what I expected. The response came almost immediately. It doesn't matter now. You're already in the game. Play by our rules, and you will live. That's when the real nightmare began. I couldn't understand what was happening. With every new letter, I felt my life slipping further out of my control. They knew everything about me. They knew where I lived, where I worked, the routes I took to get to my job. They even knew the smallest details. The fact that I bought coffee every morning from a specific cafe, that I exercised or went jogging in the evenings. How long had they been watching me? What did they want from me? Every new day brought more questions. I could no longer trust anyone. Every glance on the street seemed suspicious to me. I started avoiding people. It felt like they were all part of this game. I tried to figure things out, to understand whether it was just my fear or if they were really everywhere. But the more I thought about it, the deeper my anxiety grew. A few days after the first letter, I received an assignment. It was simple, but even then, I felt it was just the beginning. Meet a man at a cafe on the corner and give him the envelope. Everything looked very ordinary, but I could sense this wasn't just a random task. It was a test. They were checking how far I was willing to go. Would you have done it? Would you have just taken the envelope and handed it over? That's exactly what I did. I was overwhelmed with fear and curiosity at the same time. I didn't know what was in the envelope. I didn't ask. The man I handed it to looked nervous. He glanced around several times before taking the envelope. His hands were trembling. Back then, I didn't understand why he was so scared. But a few days later, I learned he was found dead. And that's when I realized I was already too deep into this game. Each new day became harder than the last. Each new letter brought a new task, and each task was more dangerous than the one before. They made me do things I had never done before. But the worst part was that I couldn't stop. If I didn't complete the task, they would find me, and I was sure I would be their next target. They called themselves the Circle. This organization was everywhere. They controlled the police, the media, even major corporations. Their influence was limitless, and I knew there was no escaping them. They played with me like a cat with a mouse, constantly keeping me on edge. I tried to find a way out. I reached out to friends, but they couldn't help me. I couldn't tell them the truth. Who would believe me? Would you believe someone if they told you an invisible organization was controlling their life and forcing them to do dangerous tasks? My friends thought I had gone mad. I had to stop talking to them to protect them. One day, they gave me a task I will never forget. It was more complicated than anything I had done before. They told me to break into one of the biggest buildings in the city and steal important documents. This task felt different. It was more dangerous, and I knew this was a turning point. I had been caught in their web for too long. I felt trapped and suffocated, knowing that even this wasn't the end. The deeper I went, the harder it was to break free. That night, I followed their instructions meticulously. Everything seemed too smooth. I managed to slip past security and reach the office on the 12th floor. There was a safe. Its code had been sent to me just before entering the building. I entered the numbers, and the safe clicked open. But what I saw inside froze me in place. Among the documents, contracts, and reports was a file with my name on it. It was a dossier on me, collected long before I had even become aware of their existence. They had been watching me for years. They had all my contacts, favorite places, passwords to my emails, even private conversations. In that moment, I realized I never had a choice. Everything had been orchestrated for me to end up here. This wasn't just a game. They had been manipulating me from the very beginning. I grabbed everything I could and fled. I had no time to think. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst from my chest. Only when I reached safety did I begin to understand what this meant. I had become a witness to something they couldn't allow. I was no longer just their pawn. I was a threat, but what could I do? I couldn't hide anymore. They would find me, no matter where I went. The police wouldn't help, that much was clear. I had no one left to trust. After delivering the documents to the journalist, I thought it was over, but it was only the beginning. You might think that once you reveal the truth, everything falls into place. But in real life, it doesn't work like that. When you start fighting a system that stands above laws, above moral principles, even above human life, it only opens new levels of fear and danger. The journalist I gave the documents to was honest, brave, and naive. He thought he could bring the Circle into the light, but they knew about him too. They knew who he was talking to, where he was going, what his weaknesses were. 2 weeks after our meeting, I found out he had been found dead in his apartment. Officially, it was a heart attack, but I knew the truth. After that, I realized I could trust no one, not even those I considered allies. I no longer knew who was with me and who was playing on their side. Maybe even the people I called friends were part of their game. That's when I disappeared. I left everything behind. My job, my apartment, my previous life. Nothing tied me down anymore. I realized even my name was just a label they could change at any time. So, I decided to change it myself. I lived under a new name in a new city. But even there, far from everything I once knew, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were still watching me. Every new acquaintance could be their person. Every step, every action could pull me back into their game. Have you ever lived in such fear? Fear that grips your throat, not letting you take a deep breath? Life becomes a mere game of survival. And with each new day, it gets harder to find meaning in continuing this struggle. You start asking yourself, what's the point? Is it worth fighting? Can such a system like the circle even be defeated? But I knew I couldn't stop, because they wouldn't stop. The moment you stop fighting, they win. And when they win, you lose more than just your life. You lose your freedom, your identity, everything that makes you, you. Months went by. I kept watching the news, waiting for the documents I had handed over to surface. But nothing happened. They blocked every attempt. Even after the journalist's death, no one dared to continue his work. The system kept everyone under control. That's when I realized I had to act on my own. I decided to do something I had never dared to do before. I started talking. At first, it was small groups of people. I told them my story. I thought that if even a few people knew what was going on behind the scenes, they would start to act. But that didn't work either. People either didn't believe me, or they were too scared to do anything about it. But I didn't give up. I looked for new ways to get the truth out. I started recording my thoughts, making videos, and publishing them online. But even there, they found me. They blocked my content, erased every trace of my attempts to expose them. At first, it was just a few missing posts. Then my social media accounts started getting shut down without explanation. My pages disappeared along with my videos, and every new attempt was met with warnings. They knew how to control even the smallest parts of my online presence. The scariest thing was how they twisted everything I did. People began to doubt my sanity. Articles appeared online labeling me a paranoid conspiracy theorist. My actions were framed as the wild ramblings of a man who had lost touch with reality. They were subtle in their approach. I couldn't prove it was them, but every time I tried to explain how it all worked, I looked crazy. You know what the hardest part was? The constant loneliness. I felt trapped, with no way out. There was no one I could trust. Even when I tried to make new acquaintances, I could never be sure if that person was part of the circle. Anyone could be a plant. Anyone could become my enemy. Over time, I started to wear down. The constant pressure, the never-ending expectation of the next blow, made my life unbearable. I stopped sleeping properly. Every noise in the night would send me into a panic. I became distrustful, even of myself. I was afraid of my own thoughts, knowing they could be influenced by them. Have you ever felt like your life was falling apart, like a house of cards? At first, it's just small things. A friend refusing to meet, a strange look from an acquaintance, an unexpected appearance of someone in a place you didn't expect to see them. And then everything starts to collapse on a larger scale. You can't plan your day because every move could be under surveillance. You can't relax for even a minute because every step, every decision could be your last. One day, I received a new letter. They were still there. It was short, with a simple message, "We know where you are. The time has come." Those words carved themselves into my consciousness like a cold blade. They let me know that the game was over, and I had no room for error. Once again, I was forced to act. I couldn't rely on any more resources or people. Only I could decide what to do next. But how? I was already a victim of my own fear and uncertainty. Then I made one final, desperate decision. I decided to disappear. Completely. Leaving behind everything I had left. I tried to vanish into a place where no one knew me. I destroyed all devices connected to me. I severed all ties to my past. I became a nobody. A person with no name, no past, and no future. My days became monotonous. I no longer had plans, dreams, or ambitions. All that concerned me was survival. Every new morning, I woke up with one thought. Would they find me today? But even in my newfound anonymity, I couldn't shake the feeling of their presence. They were there, even when I couldn't see them. Every unfamiliar glance, every stranger on public transport could be their agent. Even standing in line at a grocery store, I felt they could be there. It was only a matter of time before they found me again. This fear slowly ate away at me from the inside. I lived in constant anxiety, and it drained me to the core. My thoughts became chaotic. I was no longer sure what was real. I didn't know if they were truly chasing me, or if it was just my paranoia that had spiraled out of control. But could I doubt it, when they had already proven time and time again that they could find me anywhere? And then, one day, I realized I couldn't live like this anymore. This wasn't living. It was a pitiful existence. I had to either completely lose myself in this fear or face it head-on. I chose the latter. My final plan was desperate. I had no more resources, no friends left to help, but I decided to do what I had feared from the beginning. I decided to go public. This time, no matter how hard they tried to erase my words, I would fight back. I created multiple profiles under different names. I started posting my story in the smallest, most hidden corners of the internet. I left breadcrumbs where they couldn't erase them immediately. But this time, I took another step forward. I began looking for others who could confirm my story, those who had also fallen victim to the circle. At first, it was difficult to find such people. Most were too scared to talk. Some were already so broken that they didn't believe victory was possible. But there were those who were ready to fight, those who had gone through the same trials as I had. And we started to unite. There weren't many of us, but now we had more resources. Our goal was simple: to destroy the circle. With each passing day, our numbers grew, and with each new member, we became stronger. We were no longer lone players in this game. We became a team, and though we knew the fight would be long and hard, we now had hope. I know this isn't the end of the story. They're still out there, but now, I'm not afraid of them. Now, I know we can win. You, who have listened up to this point, are now part of this story, and now I want to ask you, what will you do with this information? Will you keep it to yourself, or will you help us reveal the truth? The choice is yours. If you're ready to fight for the truth, support us. Leave a comment, share this story, and be sure to check out the other stories on your screen. Every small step brings us closer to victory.